Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to teach you how to make these 14-inch pillows with an envelope backing where you can either add buttonholes or just have a fold like I'm doing here. You will need your embroidered block. As an example, I've used the Mandala quilt. You can see it's stitched on scuba fabric, and with the back, the stabilizer I've used is a cutaway stabilizer, so it's nice and sturdy. You will need extra fabric for the borders. I've used a 3-inch wide butterfly fabric, and I've cut enough to go 4 times or 1 time around my pillow. Then I'm also going to add the green border onto that to make it a little bit wider as well, and that is a 1.5-inch border that I've cut there. Again, you will need enough to go around your pillow. This is a 14-inch pillow. You will also need 2 pieces of back fabric. I've cut mine 10 inches by 14 inches, and I've double folded the tops over. You can, but like I said, add buttonholes if you want. I just didn't want a raw seam at the top, so I'm just folding it twice over and then stitch it down. So that is all your preparation for this pillow. So let's start assembling your pillowcase. Take one of your strips and start stitching it with a 1/4-inch seam allowance to one edge of your pillow. You will see I'm placing it right side down onto my quilted block. And you're going to stitch right from the one edge to the other edge. You can pin it in place if you want. It's easier, especially for beginners, or if you're working with scuba fabric, which is quite slippery, it can be quite useful to just pin it first. I'm using a 1/4-inch seam allowance. You can press each seam open once you are ready. I'm just going to first trim off the extra fabric, and it's easier to trim it nice and neatly to turn it the other way around like I'm doing now. So just trim it off there. Then open it up, and you can give it a nice press to keep it open. And then you're going to add your second strip, but now you're not going to just start it from the quilt block edge, you're going to start it from the previous strip edge. Remember, the strip has to be open. So pin it down, and then again with a 1/4 seam allowance, you can stitch it down. You can use 1/2 seam allowance as well. It totally depends on the width of your strips that you have done. You can now stitch the second one down and open it up again and press it flat. Remember to first trim so your border is the correct size with your block. That little piece I will discard as I want continuous pieces. But keep it for appliques for later on. Every little piece of fabric is useful. Again, open your seam, press it nice and flat, and then you can add the third strip. Again, you're going to add it from the top of the previous border right to the bottom of the quilt block. I've done all 4 sides now. The last one you will do from edge of the border to right to the bottom of the border. And again, you will now trim the bottom axis that you can see the overlap overhanging there. Open all your borders, and you can actually stop here if you don't want to add any more and finish up your pillow, but I'm going to add another little border just to make it. We're now going to start adding the green border around, and you're going to do it in the exact same way as you did the previous border. So from edge to edge, trim, quarter seam allowance, and then do the next one. Then you're going to go down, your second, your third, and your fourth. We're ready now to add our backing fabric, and you're going to place the back fabric with the right side facing down onto the right side of your block, and you're going to overlap these 2 pieces of fabric. You can see how far they overlap, about 2 to 3 inches, to make sure that it doesn't open up when you have your pillow inside. I'm first going to stitch down my raw edges so they are neat and tidy. Now that we have neatened up the edges, we are ready to stitch the back fabric in place. If you wanted your buttonholes, it's now time to add your buttons and your buttonholes to the back. You're first going to take one of the pieces and you'll lay it right side facing your block. Line it up with the top. Ensure that it's neat and flat. Your seam that you've created should be in the middle. Take the second piece and do the same with the bottom half of your block. You can now stitch all around your block. I'm first going to use some pins just to keep the fabric from slipping during stitching. As I made my border very thin on the green, I've decided to go with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance on stitching these layers together. You can go all around. You don't need to leave an opening, as we will use the envelope at the back to turn the pillowcase inside out. After stitching, you can remove the pins. And you can now turn your pillowcase inside out, making sure that you have pushed the corners especially out so that they are nice and crisp. Then take it to the iron board and give it a good press. You can now take your pillow that you're going to use inside your pillowcase, and you will see it's quite a lot bigger than the actual pillow. It's because we're going to need to create a little border that's going to stand up on the edges, which really gives it a kind of elegance. So you can measure your pillow and see more or less where you need to stitch. I've determined that I can stitch mine about 1.5 inches from the edge all around. So I'm just going to take a ruler to make sure that I'm stitching nice and straight. And I'm going to measure from my block, as I know my block was totally square. And I'm going to measure 1 inch from there. So it's about 1.5 inches from my edge. But you're not going to stitch from top to bottom. You are going to create like a contour around that block. I'm just using pins as markers. You can use a fabric marker if you want, but then you would need to wash your pillowcase after to remove those marks. So using pins, you don't need to wash. You can see how I'm pinning around so that I can create my stitch line. And you can now use either a decorative stitch if you want, or normal straight stitches, it really doesn't matter. And just stitch on that line that you have just drawn. And you will stitch right through to the back. I'm just using a normal straight stitch. So essentially you're making your slip a little bit smaller to make it fit snugly around your pillow. You can now insert your pillow and it's all done. I hope you enjoyed watching this envelope pillow making tutorial, and see you back soon. Remember to subscribe to our channel so you're notified of new projects and videos as we release them. Thank you for watching.